Hello, hello, and welcome to the next episode of No Lits, No Limits. I'm here with my favorite person in the world, Kin.
Hi,
Hey, Kin.
everyone. It's Kin here from Canada. How's everyone doing? Arek, it's great to talk to you again on this podcast. I understand you're actually on holidays while we're doing this recording.
Let's say it's a workation, something like that. But I like the word very much. Anyways, as Kin said, my name is Arek. Been in the industry a little bit over 20 years. Focused on Eastern Europe. Been with distribution before and also with an EMS companies. And together with Kin, we have this wonderful podcast. Kin, few words about yourself.
Sure. I've been working in manufacturing operations for over 30 years. I've got a real passion for everything having to do with manufacturing, everything having to do with operations, and more recently, getting into leadership roles to really help teams go through transformations of onboarding AI and digitization and all that great stuff. So really enjoying this kind of type of work because it's a new problem every day, which makes it very, very fun.
Yeah, I like the digitalization and the AI usage. So I must say I'm also trying to, learn more and move from different language models. Recently I really enjoyed working with Cloud Code and kind of build my own CRM. And we are applying as much as I can for the daily usage. But the problem I see is that you have a lot of data and then applying different formulas into it, it's not always easy because you're not going to get the same level of accuracy when you get the feedback from the tool. So anything on your world that you are currently implementing, maybe something that is helpful for people like me or for people from OEMs or EMSs that are struggling with loads and loads of data?
Yes, I know that's a very common challenge for us working, whether it's manufacturing or sales or marketing. We recently brought a couple of guests on a podcast talking about
Yeah.
marketing strategies, digital marketing. We work with so much data day in and day out. This is where I think the AI applications really kind of help us because as humans, it's hard to try to pull all this data in to make sense. I've had the fortune of working with some very, very talented data analysts in previous jobs to learn about some of the techniques they use. Telling the story from a lot of data is difficult. It's not something that's intuitive. But there are models that we can look at to help us get through that. And one of the recent ones that I've recently learned about is a very interesting way to look at data. Like, I'm just curious, like what kind of data might you tend to work with? I mean, do you work with, for example, some sales data, sales trending?
Yes, yes. So sales data is something, when you really want to look at the customer perspective and the potential for sure, the DTAM, CTAM, all of these things. Yeah, exactly. Something like that. But also, contacts because prospecting now is very important and getting the right leads. So also something like that. And I'm applying AI to help out and to find, but it's not always really giving me the things that I'm looking for. So then you either try to rewrite the prompt in a better way or you just have to go and do it manually. So if there is anything that you are using, I'm happy to learn, as you know.
Well, we see a chart like this often in our work
Mhm.
when it comes to looking at sales trending, sales forecasts. We see the sales numbers. We see certain maybe seasonal type of a trend. I don't know if you see a sales chart like this, Garek. Are you happy or are you worried?
Yeah, I'm very happy. I'm very happy. I see some dips, but I'm very happy. It's a very positive trend. Would love to
Well,
have
to
those.
different people, I see data differently. When I see a trend like this, I would, as an operations professional, I would get a little scared. I'm going, wow, what is that sales team doing? They're going to kill us. We're flooding all these, orders coming in. But generally, in a company, I think to see a chart something like this is a really good
Mhm.
trend. But
Yep.
the interesting part is, when you look at the red arrow on here, is what is really that next step? What does that future look like? Well, we don't really know, do we? It's just a guess at this point. If all of a sudden the trend reverses, we just say, oh, well, that's what happened in the market. Maybe something happened in the global economic condition, whatever it is. It's really, really hard to forecast. And even some companies, in my experience, spend tens of thousands of dollars on forecasting software which all it's going to do is just take a best guess. And I think even the AI is just kind of doing something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, there is a broader picture needs to be taken into the account.
Yeah. So data, and when it's put in this context, is something that we want to draw more insight from it. But how do we do that? I mean, another example I just wanted to share here is this kind of a chart. I work with a lot of quality assurance teams, and they'll
Hmm.
often publish a chart like this that tracks the kind of defects we might have in within the company. And this is what I call is called a Pareto chart. What I like about Pareto charts, Eric, is if, the way they sort this chart from sort of the most severe defects on the left
Yeah.
towards the least or less severe defects on the right. And then the big red line is a cumulative line to show you the severity. This chart puts the data into a better context so that it actually shows us where to focus. So you've heard of the 80-20 rule, right, Eric?
Sure. Yeah.
What can
20.
you share about your experience working with the 80-20 rule?
I would say this is the simplest yet the most effective approach because even in the example that you gave, you focus on shorts and misalignment, and you already got almost to the 80%. So not that many because it's only two out of the six here, but they already represent the majority, vast majority of the problems that you have. So yeah, it's
Sure.
always good to use Pareto.
Yeah, I think of the simple layman's terms in the 80-20 rule, which applies to me personally, is I want to put in 20% effort to get 80% return on my effort. But seriously, like the 80-20 rule is actually a really good rule. Pareto's law says essentially focus on the 20% of problems, which is generating 80% of your headache.
Yep.
And in a Pareto chart, we really kind of look at in this particular example, the first two bars cumulatively about 760 plus. That's about 80% of the defects that's being tracked here. If let's say there's 1,000 defects roughly.
Hmm.
So focusing on this problem when the first two bars representing shorts and misalignment, for example, will get rid of 80% of your quality defects. That's huge. That's a huge transformation for increasing the quality of this operation. So this is where the data and once you put it into a more clear context, this is going to really let us take some actionable steps to go and address the actual issue at hand. So one of the things that I want to share with our audience here is a model which I recently learned called a DIKW model. Have you heard of this, Eric?
No, not really. Not really. I mean,
Interesting. This is not something new yet. It was something that I've only recently learned, and one of my mentors taught me about this at my in my last job. And what the DIKW model is it is often written in a pyramid form like this. The D stands for data. The I stands for information.
okay.
So, the data becomes information, I guess, somehow.
Hmm.
What do you think the K might stand for? And it's not kin.
That would be good. I'm assuming if you're going this direction, probably knowledge, but it might be also knocking out the
Knocking out of the park. That's a good one. But you're absolutely right. Knowledge. And then the W is, being
win.
wise, wisdom, or the win. Sure. I like that. The win's good. DIKW model looks something like this once it's fully populated. So we've got data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. So let's talk about this step by step. The
Mhm.
data we just talked about, like the previous chart, for example, we looked at a sales chart like this,
Yep.
a Pareto chart like this. There's a lot of data in here. But these charts, we've always learned, for me anyways, decades of putting this data into a chart form so that you can see the data in a clearer way. We call that contextualizing the data, right? This is where if you can answer the who, what, where, when questions about that data, that's putting the data into a structure which has purpose. And this is how data becomes information. So you move up in this pyramid. Information is information, right? But information by itself is also not totally usable. So even with those charts, without some explanation, I think of it as interpretation and identifying patterns and principles, like we saw in the sales trending we talked about, or the Pareto chart. That's when information becomes useful knowledge. So, as an example, in here at the very bottom, so a piece of data might be 72 BPM. By itself, it doesn't really mean anything. Is it 72 beats per minute music, which is not all that fast paced? Is it 2 beats per minute? Maybe. Information says it's the resting heart rate over time. That's important, right? That puts the 72 BPM into a context which completely paints a very specific picture for us. And the knowledge you might draw from, well, what does 72 BPM resting heart rate over time tell us? Well, that's a little bit above average, as
Hmm.
I don't know about you, but I'm not very athletic sometimes, even though I have a passion for pickleball. But, I really should be working on my health to get my resting heart rate a little bit below 72 beats per minute, closer to about 50 or 60 beats per minute. What is your resting heart rate? Just curious.
I don't know. I'm also on the should be path, so I haven't checked.
Okay. So we ought to be playing more pickleball together, Eric, at some point.
Oh yes, oh yes, pickleball and motorcycles all day long.
Yes, yes. So having that knowledge of a potential health risk if our resting heart rate is above 70, that's the actionable piece. Oh, the wisdom is maybe we need to be doing more sport. Maybe we need to be eating a little healthier. Maybe we need to adopt a different lifestyle. That's the wisdom we can draw from this. Another example, a piece of data might be 1,000 units sold. Great work, Eric. You closed that order, 1,000 pieces, right? Well, information from there would be, well, if you actually look at the monthly trend, 1,000 pieces was actually one of our lowest orders in the month. Boy, what do we have to do? Well, we would, possibly look at, hey, what was the peak demand? If the peak demand was actually more like 25,000 pieces in the last 12 months, you can see 1,000 piece order was actually very low. So when I see something like this, it makes me really worried, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah. So the wisdom we would draw from something like that kind of data, again, once you draw the knowledge from the data information that you're presented, your knowledge would be, wow, okay, 1,000 piece month is not that great. Let's step up some marketing and sales activity and go and connect with more customers. That might be what we might draw, and now you leverage your data in the CRM to go and try to do and close more sales. Right?
So, Ken, question to you, because
Yeah.
that's a regular process. Like you just showed that we had the data, then you showed the graph, so we moved from D to I, then the knowledge on the on the tips we had in the first graph. So I need to understand how did the competition work, what is going on with the market and everything, and then I can apply wisdom. But which steps do you feel like are the best for you to help with the AI? Because if I look at the process, I can put the raw data that is already a kind of information. Either create my own RAG or I have Notebook LM or something like that. And then just simply do the prompt. So in this step, isn't my like DIK in one step and then the prompt and the feedback would be the wisdom? Or am I mistaken?
You are absolutely correct in the right direction. So we
Okay.
feed a bunch of data into
Mm.
our AI models. We get it to look at, our sales charts, our past performance. We might
Mhm.
get it to look at a bunch of websites, for example, to mine information about our potential customers and where some of those orders might be closed. Whatever that data is, if it's contextualized, like a website, to the AI model, it's going to see it as rich data or information under this model. So having the raw data and information input into the AI models is exactly what the knowledge layer is. So the
Hmm.
AI models really turn that raw data and information and all the input you give it. I really love how you mentioned Notebook LM, one of my favorite tools. You give it all this context of this bunch of data, a bunch of information, and the AI makes knowledge out of all that associated or maybe disassociated data and looks for trending. So one of the things that we see here in this model is the knowledge is used to interpret information, identify patterns and principles. And that's exactly what the AI models are super good at doing. It's answering the how. Like, how did this happen? How did this come about? How is this happening? And once we see the AI says, oh, this is the data, the information that I see, and this is the trend or knowledge that comes out of this. When you see that from the AI, us as a human will now be able to draw the wisdom from that
Right.
information. Okay, the AI
Got
is
it.
telling me, for example, my sales data, the sales trending, I'm going to expect to potentially have a slower next quarter. What am I going to do about it?
Mhm.
Some of the models now are proposing to give you some better wisdom to take action on, no, make some inferences and suggestions. But so far, our AI models are not quite at the point where it's going to take actions for you. And this is the part that I think a lot of people understand. And even a lot of our AI models always kind of warn us, please double check the output from this model because the AI might hallucinate and might make mistakes. And
Oh,
the
yeah.
reason is drawing wisdom is something that I think only humans can really effectively do today, because this is part of what we do in day work as professionals in making business decisions in on a job, whether it's in our sales department, whether it's in our operations department, quality department. The actionable items really needs that deeper understanding of the why. And I think that's an important way of looking at this DIKW model is the W part, the wisdom is also a why. To understand the why really forces you to think beyond the information that you see in front of you, beyond the numbers, beyond the information, really interpret the knowledge, not just the information, and then use your experience, use your insight, use a little bit of that creativity and innovation to really come up with the ideas on what is actionable, what you need to do, how do we change the business, what is the strategy.
Yeah. I agree with you very much. I mean, it's like we discussed at the very beginning of all of our discussions. The quality of the data is very important because without the good quality of the data, even the brightest and best models will not give you the right decisions. And moreover, they can hallucinate. So yeah, garbage in, garbage out as always, right? So this is the number one. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for the
definitely. Having the garbage in means your data has some incorrect facts that are going into this model, and when you build your whole model on incorrect facts or false facts, well, your whole pyramid is going to collapse. And I think this is a very good way to visualize and think about how we do our work. I actually, print this poster out on my wall just to remind myself and also my team and colleagues about always thinking about, is this information that's actionable? Is this knowledge that's actionable? We have data all the time. We have tons and tons of data within the company. And certainly, we touched on in the beginning, digitization. When your data is
Mhm.
not in digital format, as in it's on a piece of paper, the piece of paper is where data goes to die. Once you print it out on a piece of paper, it's dead data. I always love that quote because it's true. I find it funny that in my experience, we've always printed out charts or printed out reports on pieces of paper, and I've really, really resisted that for the last several years. And now I really see why we shouldn't print things on pieces of paper anymore, especially in the perspective of this DIKW pyramid model.
Well, I would say with the age of AI, our digitalization got really fast because you can just take a picture of something and AI will digitalize that information in a much better way sometimes if we would do it. So, and I use the picture to data every day, honestly.
Yeah, the way to digitize things now makes it so much easier with AI, and
Mhm.
models are so much more accessible. I'm curious, Arik, are you looking forward to potentially testing some AI agents?
So I kind of am already, but not really that there is an agent that is this created and is constantly working on something. But I would have a kind of gem in Gemini that I can always utilize the same thing. So it's like a mini agent, let's say, but always, you have to feed with something. And then when you are coding with Claude, Claude itself can deploy agents that are working on different things. But this is so far on my level, it's the kind of action and then reaction. It's not like there's something happening. I just started actually this week is the first one when I asked with this kind of loop action, so it will be recurring. So we'll see how this will go. But yeah, definitely this is great fun because as I said, for me the whole AI journey is really a translator, but not language. Meaning if I don't know how to do things, it will just help me to do it. I do it on a daily basis with simple things like, how to cook, how to clean several things, how to assemble things. Honestly, yes. And then also in business, like building the app or the tool that is helping me in the daily life. That's a little bit above my knowledge of coding. So yeah, I'm very happy with this. Yeah.
My AI journey right now is we've got some very talented interns that been onboarded, and they're going through that first 2 3 months of probationary period in their training to make sure they
Mhm.
learn and understand, and we're testing them as much as they're trying us out. You know what it's like to onboard a new staff like that. I see our AI technology is kind of in that probationary period right now. We're testing them out. We're making sure they're doing the right thing. We're training them. We're guiding them. We're learning how better to use them. I think the age of AI agents is coming around the corner, and we'll visit this in a future episode, I'm sure. Once we have AI agents, this is kind of like the same analogy to trusting that new intern to go and run a project on her own,
Mhm.
on his own. And I think that's going to be a very exciting time for us in manufacturing operations because it'll be very transformational. And I think that AI agents is going to be definitely the future. There's a lot of attention put to it. There's a lot of focus put on it by many different companies like Anthropic, like OpenAI, like Google as well. Actually, all companies pouring tons of resource into really building out effective agents, and I'm just so excited at what's around the corner.
Yeah, I'm excited, and also, let's see what it means for us in the future. But I think the more we use it, the better quality of data and more wisdom decisions we will be able to take.
Sure. Well, and that takes us to our end of our chat today. I hope that the audience got something out of this. And if you have any ideas or questions about how better to use the DIKW model, share that with us. Or if you have any AI agents really excite you, we want to hear from you as well.
Please, that would be lovely.
All right. Until our next episode, thank you, Arik, for asking these great questions. And I really appreciate the time.
Kin, thank you again for your wisdom and knowledge. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.